Okay, I want to welcome our speaker, Matthew Wald. With a very distinguished career. He worked for many years as a uh, editor on energy policy for the New York Times, which included a lot having to do with nuclear power. He also, after that, went as a communications consultant for the Nuclear Energy Institute, which is a trade association for the nuclear utilities. And for the last few years, he's been at the Breakthrough Institute, which is a non-governmental organization that promotes pro-technology energy solutions. They're based in California, in the Bay Area. He's also written a lot of articles, and lately you can find some of these on LinkedIn. And also, the Breakthrough Institute has a newsletter that's, I believe, part of Substack. I'll go ahead and turn this over to him now.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. I'm flattered to be invited to speak to you today because probably nearly all of you know more about nuclear engineering than I do, but I'm hoping that my view of the energy economy, the politics of the grid is broad enough so I can add a little bit to your knowledge. And I hope in the Q&A I'll pick up some information, some knowledge too. I've been through about 30 reactors over the years. I have a broad view of the technology, but there's always something new. I've also spent a lot of time looking at new designs, kicking the tires on what hardware is available to see, including the AP1000 and NuScale. I've written about Natrium, X-Energy, and Kairos. I should say that these days I write a lot for the American Nuclear Society and for the Breakthrough Institute, an NGO that advocates for advanced nuclear, but I'm not representing any of those today. I'm just here speaking for myself. I'm going to lay out some ideas and then hope for a good discussion. First, the most underappreciated, I'm going to be technical here and share my screen. The most underappreciated and misunderstood character in contemporary America is Reddy Kilowatt. Remember Reddy? He was a marketing tool about 100 years ago. He was banned in the 70s as a symbol of consumption. I think we should bring back Reddy. Consuming electricity is good for you. It correlates with health, comfort, wealth, and prosperity. But we do need to get our electricity house in order. And I'm going to see if I can stop sharing. There we go. Okay. We're adding heat pumps. We're adding electric cars. We're adding data centers. We're going to be doing more air conditioning than ever. Consumer electronics companies keep coming up with new plug-in gadgets. What are we up to now? The iPhone 14? I will take bets from all of you on when we hit the iPhone 100. We've got people tearing their hair out over how to meet the threat of climate change. And we've got millions of people who want to do their part, all while electricity consumption increases. Some steps might help, like heat pumps or electric cars, or better windows and refrigerators. The hot item right now is a solar panel that you put on your balcony and then plug into an AC outlet. It delivers power, it doesn't take it. Maybe you don't own your roof or your roof doesn't face the right way, which is about 41% of American households. Now, suppose you're one of the 41% and you're determined to do your bit anyway. The Washington Post has a feature called the Climate Coach, and it recently advised, can't put solar panels on your roof? Plug in balcony solar. It may be for you. This is a gadget that you take out of the box, attach it to your apartment balcony with zip ties. There's supposedly 4 million of them in Germany. The Climate Coach says he got 200 watts out of this, out of an 800-watt 4-panel display on a cloudy day in San Francisco. Now, in the days when I was writing for newspapers, I was thought not to be redundant. Cloudy day in San Francisco is redundant. It's always cloudy there. But it's hard to think of a worse place for a solar panel. The author says until he tried, he said for a cost of $1,200, he could make 1,400 kilowatt hours annually. That implies a capacity factor of about 20%, which is pretty good for a solar panel mounted vertically instead of horizontally, whether in San Francisco or anywhere else. I'd expect it to be less than half of that. This is artisanal energy policy. which is my term for people who think that steps you take at home are going to solve our energy problems. This is energy policy without regard to the decimal point. It won't do the job. We're going to need some major new power plants. At this point, I'm reminded of an observation from my favorite philosopher, Eeyore. Anybody here got small children or grandchildren? You remember Eeyore? This was Christopher Robin's donkey. Eeyore said, could be worse. Not sure how, but it could be. Well, here's how it could be. The article said the system would save as much as $450 in California. That's about 32 cents a kilowatt hour. This is around double the national average price. Another product, a 200-watt system called a starter system, could make 140 kilowatt hours a year and save $54, but that works out to an even more expensive 38 cents a kilowatt hour. This is artisanal energy planning. If you can sell a kilowatt hour for 38 cents, I can think of a lot better ways to make it. We're not at 38 cents yet. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're now at about 19 cents a kilowatt hour, up from 14 cents in 2020 and 13 cents in 2010 and 9 cents in the good old days, 2000. The other problem with artisanal energy policy is it doesn't work as part of a system. Solar and wind tribalists, that's what they are, they're tribalists, keep saying that their costs are going down. That's true, but so is their value. When electricity prices go negative, as they were in Spain just before the Iberian crash, it doesn't matter what the costs are to put in a new solar panel because the product is worthless or worse than worthless. But systems engineering is just not in style today. It figures for the value of electricity, if the figures for value of electricity, I'd like to run through another energy deal if you didn't like that one I'm directly involved in. My wife and I decided to escape the hot summers of Washington, D.C. for a cabin in the Catskill Mountains in New York. We bought a house 2 years ago. It had an 11 kilowatt generator running on propane. The man who built the house was no fool. The local utility is highly unreliable. If we hear distant thunder, our lights go out. Excuse me. So I did some calculations on the generator. At full load, it's got an thermal efficiency of about 21%. In New York, gas is on the margin, and it probably has an efficiency of 50%. At the current price of propane, I'm spending 26 cents a kilowatt hour just for fuel. Then the maintenance cost, changing the oil, the spark plugs, is around 23 cents a kilowatt hour. Depreciation is around 17 cents. All in, it's about 66 cents a kilowatt hour. If I were building it today, it'd be closer to 71 cents because the price of the generator's gone up. That is probably more than triple what I'm paying for grid electricity. I'm not complaining. Electricity is an odd commodity. It has few substitutes. And while it's cheap compared to the work it does, it's also highly misunderstood. My refrigerator costs me about 19 cents a day in electricity, which might sound steep, but how much would I pay to prevent it all from going bad? In that context, 71 cents a kilowatt hour sounds like a good deal. And you know what? My home generator is a bargain. If I work from home, I can keep the computer and Wi-Fi and internet going. The beer in the fridge stays cold. The microwave will heat up the soup that's in the freezer. We have a well and a septic system. How much is it worth to you to be able to flush a toilet? In fact, after the 2003 blackout that stretched from Detroit to New York City, didn't hit you folks in Tennessee, the Wall Street Journal put the value of lost business for the duration of the blackout at about $5 per kilowatt hour. I see a range of estimates for the Iberian blackout in April in economic losses and the amount of energy not used when the grid dumped 31 megawatts of load, but it may be over $20,000 US dollars per megawatt hour, or about 20 bucks a kilowatt hour. Of course, in Spain, it's a little different. This gazpacho gets warm and the paella gets cold, but you get the idea. The basic issues are the same. But we'd be much better off if we put our money into collective solutions. In the American case, it would mean the investment in the grid. If all the money that had gone into generators in my neighborhood went into the grid instead, we'd all be better off. Now we hear predictions for rapid demand growth. I'm not sure I believe all of them. Among other issues, I suspect that the efficiency of data centers will continue to improve, especially if the price of electricity or its availability are factors. But demand will grow, which is a novelty these days. And the nuclear industry, the nuclear community, has committed industrial sin it is facing a market that wants its product and it has no product. Nuclear suffered through a long drought, and now it sees terrific demand for its product, and it's not ready. We're going to miss the first round of construction, which is almost always going to be natural gas, or the energy managers want it to be natural gas, and there aren't even enough gas generators or capacity to build them. And when the nuclear industry does get rolling, it'll be different. Lately, it seems that the kind of people who used to build these plants aren't interested anymore. The utilities are on the sidelines, at least so far. Look at who's building the XE100, the gas graphite reactor. That's Dow, a chemical company, or Natrium, the sodium fast reactor married to a molten salt storage system. That's TerraPower, a reactor company, or Hermes in your backyard. That's being built by Kairos, another reactor startup, or the Oklo Powerhouse. That's Oklo, another startup. TVA may be an exception. It's an established nuclear company, but it has challenges of its own, including a debt ceiling problem and the lack of a quorum. The White House could fix this if the White House could pay attention for long enough. Excuse me. So while we're racing for new technologies, we're also reaching a point where our business model for making power is changing too. It has to change. Most of the country have gone to a market system that worked more or less okay in static circumstances, but now demand is projected to grow sharply. The market system doesn't allow for utility construction of durable, capital-intensive clean power plants. It only allows for building that can be done quickly and cheaply, and that means fossil gas. In theory, the market, MISO, PJM, California, New England, Texas, New York, is a level playing field. But it's like building a new high school and telling the kids they can play any sport they want. They get out on the field and they're trying to play baseball, but they're looking at a soccer pitch. The future of the market system isn't clear either. Lately, we've seen a lot of side deals. Most recently, Vistra has disclosed a deal to sell half the output of its Comanche Peak reactors to an unnamed buyer for 20 years. These deals take electricity from nuclear off the market and direct it, at least in a financial sense, to specific consumers. The deals can sometimes be a price hedging bet for buyers and sellers. Their product and revenues years into the future can be predicted, which could be an advantage, especially in Texas where prices go crazy. Power purchase agreements, like the one disclosed by Vistra in a Securities and Exchange Commission filing, were once the best known tool used by solar and wind developers to gain enough credibility to get the bankers to lend them money to get their projects built. But this financial strategy has morphed into the hands of nuclear energy companies, both those with operating reactors and those hoping to build new ones. Some of these agreements, known as PPAs, power purchase agreements, add to the national supply of zero carbon energy, but some appear mostly to do something simpler. They generate bragging rights for the buyers who want to seem green. For example, earlier this year, Amazon expanded a power purchase agreement with Talon Energy to buy 1,900 megawatts from Talon's Susquehanna reactors for an adjacent data center and other Amazon sites in Pennsylvania through 2042. It seems likely that these reactors, which were completed in the 1980s, would have run with or without a PPA. That makes an agreement of the amount that comes from, that makes an agreement that doesn't alter the balance of fossil fuels and nuclear on the power grid, or it doesn't do a thing for the overall system. But Amazon can claim that its carbon footprint is smaller. Less clear is the 20-year deal that Meta, the parent of Facebook, signed with Constellation to take 1,100 megawatts from Constellation's Clinton reactor for its Illinois data center. Constellation said this assured the plant's continued operation. In fact, a few years ago when natural gas prices crashed, the state of Illinois had to step in with clean energy credits to keep Clinton running. Now, its economic condition is much stronger. Constellation says that the agreement assures the plant's long-term operation. Constellation signed another deal with Microsoft in September of 24 for a 20-year PPA at above market rates that Constellation used to create a business case to reopen the 3 Mile Island Unit 1 reactor, which it shut in 2019. That clearly represents additional energy. Power purchase agreements aren't unique to tech companies. The Wolverine Power Co-op just signed one with Holtec to take power from the Palisades nuclear plant, one reason that Holtec moved to reopen the plant. But these agreements can also work in the other direction. NextEra had a power purchase agreement with the Duane Arnold nuclear plant in Iowa, excuse me, with Alliant Energy. But when the bottom dropped out of the natural gas market in 2018 and prices on the wholesale market fell, both sides agreed to cut the deal short by 5 years in exchange for a payment by Alliant to NextEra, and Duane Arnold retired in 2020. Now, NextEra is trying to bring the plant back to life. And there's some new entries in the reactor construction business. On September 8th, the NRC announced it had accepted for review the partial application of something called Fermi America to build 4 Westinghouse AP1000 reactors. This is remarkable, 4 huge reactors, all to go in the same place in Amarillo, Texas, to run a data center there. Now, I don't know if they're going to get built, or if they do, how they'll be financed. But I look at this as more evidence of the demise of the utility model as we know it. First, the utilities were soup to nuts generators. They generated, they transmitted, they distributed. Sometimes they even dug the coal. Then came the quote deregulation. They were either load-serving entities or they were putting power on the grid. Now we've got private shops serving private loads. This is devolution. There's some other parts of the model that are going to have to change too. Licensing, for example. Yes, regulators are going to have to supply human intelligence to each license application, but the process has got to run many times faster than it does now, especially if we're going to license reactors that are just 300 megawatts or 30 megawatts or 10 megawatts or 1 megawatt. What we've got now is the equivalent of you or me going to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a license, taking the road test, passing the written test, and then sitting down while an artist uses oil paints to paint our picture. These are just, one by one individual licenses. If we're going to think big, we've got to rethink regulation. And if we're going to have a renaissance, we're going to have to stamp out new products like we stamp out Boeing 737s, or we used to stamp out Liberty ships. And in serial production, if not mass production, it's got to be the economics that are key. It's the economics that will count. We've got to design the better mousetrap, figure out how to build it, how to deliver it at competitive cost. Carbon reduction pledges will help in the market, but in the end, nuclear will rise or fall on the economics. The politics will have to change too. There's a cliche, not in my backyard, but some of the new designs will occupy literally about as much space as a backyard. Some of the designs are plug-and-play cores, with the old core going back to the manufacturer every few years. The people who object to having the reactor in their backyard may turn out to be the neighbors of the headquarters where the reactor plant, where the core comes back. Life is going to change. So I was reminded a few years ago, I was on business at the headquarters of the Hertz company, Hertz Rent-A-Car in New Jersey. And you walk in, it's a modern glass and steel lobby, and sitting under bright lights is this car that looks a little like a Model T. It's got open wheels, exposed radiator, and written diagonally on the radiator in silver script, it says Hertz. Mr. Hertz was a contemporary of Mr. Ford, and they had 2 ideas for business models. Ford said he was going to build cars and sell them. Hertz said, who would want to own a car? You can't use it all day long. It's expensive. What we'll do is we'll build them and we'll rent them to people. So Hertz set out to build cars and rent them to people. Pretty soon it figured out it was cheaper to buy cars from Ford and rent them to people. And pretty soon if the world figured out this was a niche market, most people were going to own these things. Where we come out on the balance of nuclear, I don't know. But almost everything we knew about planning, building, licensing a nuclear plant is up for grabs at the moment. And of course, the technology is too. And I see we've got a house full of people here, and I hope you have questions, and please fire at me on anything in this field. Anybody?
Yes. Germany is trying to go green, but without nuclear. Do you think maybe they're doomed to failure?
They've fallen into two traps. One of them was predictable, one of them isn't. The one that was predictable is they have not, they've spent terrific amounts of money but haven't lowered their carbon footprint. They're building new coal plants because they need reliable electricity. The part they couldn't predict is wanting to get off Russian gas, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, probably by the Ukrainians, it's not clear, and just the desire to stop relying on fossil fuels from Russia. They are shivering in the dark, and this isn't working, but thus far, they haven't quite recognized it isn't working. I don't know what it is that's going to bring them around. What'll bring them around probably is the fall of the Green Party from power and some more pragmatic thinking, but I couldn't tell you exactly when that's going to be.
They don't know where the decimal point is. Your book.
I'm sorry, they don't know where the what?
The decimal point.
The decimal point is. That's correct. That's correct. This is the country where balcony solar is flourishing. Why are my lights going out? I've got I've got a 200-watt panel on my balcony.
I've got a question.
Please.
What about the concept of massive solar power with a natural gas backup, but the peak that it needs when the sun's not out?
The problem, we should feel fortunate in this country that we've got different regions with different policies, and we can let California try it out for us and see what happens. The problems, California has two sets of problems. One of them is it's true that installing a solar system has gotten cheaper, but you've got to maintain an enormous gas infrastructure to keep the lights on, and the price of that keeps rising because you're not spreading the operations and maintenance cost over many kilowatt hours. The other problem is their famous duck curve, where the sun goes down and the loss of solar is so sudden and is at the same time as people are coming home, turning on their air conditioners, turning on their big screen TVs, turning on their microwaves, they get a peak in electric demand and the gas can't spool up fast enough. So they have invested heavily in batteries. People think, oh, that's so we can keep the lights on when the sun isn't shining. That's partly true. What's really happening with with California Solar is they've got to meet this terrific ramp, and the batteries are giving a little breathing room for the system while the natural gas gets going. Okay, I see a question in the chat. What happened to Intel's copy exactly? We could get to that point. We do have, at this time, one fully licensed system, the NewScale plant, which in theory, you can get a site pre-qualified. You can go out and order them. They've got builders. At the moment, it just isn't selling. It's a little hard to determine why. As these plants get smaller, copy exactly is going to be necessary. If you look at something like Boeing 737s, they're not exact. They evolve over time, but the changes are small enough that they can be stamped out with good quality control in relatively uniform fashion. Bob S., go ahead.
Yes, throughout the Southeast, I know North Carolina, South Carolina, probably all the way down the coast, I'm seeing massive solar fields, former farmland that has been transitioned into solar farms. And of course, that removes the land from food production also. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in agriculture, but several things are happening. One of them is agriculture's gotten better. You need less land to produce the food we need. And farmers are pretty good economists. And if they can get more money for leasing their land for solar than they can for raising corn or soybeans or something else, they'll do it. So you're looking at, I would say you're looking at the market system in action, except that a lot of the solar is going to meet, I'm not so sure about the Southeast, but a lot of the solar is going to meet quotas and is selling at well above market rates. We can feed ourselves with a lot less farmland. That's one of the reasons we're losing farmland. It isn't necessary if you use enough nitrogen fertilizer, enough mechanization, et cetera, et cetera. Whether this is a good idea, I'm not sure, but that's the direction they're going. I don't think most people appreciate how diffuse a resource solar is and how much land it takes to produce appreciable amounts of power.
Thank you.
Recently, as a matter of fact, just last week, they just announced in California that the world's largest solar farm is actually being shut down.
Yeah.
One of the things that
I thought that was a fascinating experiment. This was not solar photovoltaic with panels. This was mirrors about the size of a car windshield sitting on pedestals that were computer controlled. And they focused on a tower with a tank on the top painted black. And they heated the fluid in the tower. It was molten salt. And the salt would circulate down to a reservoir. And then you could make electricity by circulating water pipes through the molten salt and producing steam. One of the problems with solar photovoltaics is on a partly cloudy day, you get wild fluctuations in power output. And of course, when the sun goes down, you're sunk. This system could store electricity, could even out production, could give you electricity during peak hours in the evening. And they added a natural gas burner because you've got the steam turbines, you've got the molten salt. You could ride through a few cloudy days with natural gas. They cut a deal with the state of California that a certain percentage of the heat input would have to be solar in order for them to get subsidies, and the rest could be gas. And they had it had technical promise. And in a way, it was something that would help the grid more than that amount of solar panels. They had technical problems keeping it running. They used more gas than they were supposed to. And eventually they pulled the plug. I think we in the nuclear business should be sympathetic to advanced technologies that just don't pan out. It doesn't mean they weren't worth trying, but that one did not work. Someone is adding that it killed all the birds. Yeah, that's correct. They would burst into flames. You could see it from flying overhead, brightly illuminated, concentrated sun. And windmills kill birds, other things kill birds. But yes, it killed birds. Okay, I'm looking in the chat here. What about radioactive waste disposal? I think the Biden administration just kind of punted on this and went to consent-based siting, which could yield something. It's worked in Canada, it's worked in Sweden and in Finland. We have a different system in this country where you may get a town or a county that's enthusiastic and the state will block the way. So I don't know if that's going to work. The Trump administration wants to bring back reprocessing, which would reduce the problem, although of course not solve it. The industry has simply stopped regarding this as a problem. The casks are solid and boring, and they will last for many decades to come. But eventually, we will need some solution to this. Is there any other material waste made by fusion? Well, fusion creates a lot of activation products that are highly radioactive for shorter periods. It's not like it doesn't create radioactive waste, but they're more manageable. I don't know if we're ever going to have fusion. I know a lot of people have high hopes for it. I don't know if we need it. We may, but I don't know where that's taking us. I think fusion seeks to solve two problems that fission does not in fact have. One is a shortage of fuel. We don't have a shortage of of uranium, and we don't have any shortage of plutonium if we want it. And the other is radioactive waste, but that problem is manageable. The floor is open.
Will the mic pick it up? Mic check?
Here we go. Wait a second. There's another question in the chat. Thorium is fairly abundant as well. I was fascinated by a company based in Chicago that recently is now completing a test at INL. They've got a little bit of a HALEU mixed with thorium, and it breeds fuel. It breeds U-233 in situ. You don't reprocess. And it's designed for a CANDU reactor. It reduces the volume of waste by a factor of 7. The logical place for this is India. And in fact, the company's founders are from India. But the logical place to test, and India has large reserves of thorium and has CANDU style reactors. The logical place to test it is Canada. Unfortunately, the politics don't work out right now because the government of India apparently sent a couple of hitmen to British Columbia to rub out some Sikh separatist who was living there. And if Canada and India were adjacent, they'd probably be at war by now. So this was not good news, but the tests done at INL on this fuel were quite promising. Bob, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry to hog the questions, but you touched on reprocessing, and it seems like now we've just had a paradigm shift that reprocessing is fine and wonderful. Yet Carter,
I'm sorry.
many years.
To me, it looks like you are frozen. Say again. I touched on reprocessing and what?
Reprocessing and proliferation, basically.
Right.
Carter, can you hear me okay?
Now I hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Carter decided not to go to a plutonium-based economy and shut that down many years ago. And now people are just coming along willy-nilly saying, oh yeah, it's fine. We got plenty of fuel and everything, but there's a heck of a proliferation issue with reprocessing and dealing with plutonium. Well, anyway, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, that's a matter of some debate. The North Koreans took open source designs of an old British gas graphite reactor, and used it to make plutonium. The Israelis used a French research reactor, which was not designed for plutonium, and turned that into a plutonium machine. But the favored route is the Urenco enrichment designs that were stolen by the Pakistanis. And that's what the Iranians are using or were using. That's what Pakistan used. That's what Muammar Gaddafi was using. I don't think that plutonium is the easiest, and recycled plutonium is the easiest or most sensible route to the bomb. There are much easier ways to do it. There are ways to do it that are less observable. I think we do need proliferation controls, but this doesn't strike me as a showstopper.
Okay, thank you.
You used the example of the 737. I consider a different example. You know, they used to stamp out 737s because, in fact, the 737 underwent enough design changes incrementally.
Yes.
Especially those engines, and you're familiar with this issue, that
yes.
really was a different airframe, but they exploited their relationship with the government, with the regulator, to license it as the same aircraft. And it really wasn't, and it got hundreds of people killed. So, there's that risk with not rubber stamping, I exaggerate, but, not treating nuclear applications with some really squinty green eye shades. And as for people who buy generators, they buy them because of risk. If people thought the grid would always be there, well, they wouldn't have to buy a generator. But people
Yes.
don't trust, so that's why they invest in this economically suboptimal solution, because it provides minimum necessary capability. When you don't have it, you know, you've got what Spain got, which is you get the $20 a kilowatt hour opportunity cost.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And to use a technical term, Boeing and the FAA screwed up. Uh, but it's also true that airline fleets have terrific advantages because if one airplane suffers some anomaly, everybody knows about it very quickly, and you can go out and look at the hardware on your own airplane and see if you have that hardware and if it has the same problem. In nuclear plants, you come up with some component that's defective, and the first question, which may take you a while to answer, is, do I have that component in my plant or don't I? Uh, the airlines are much better set up to share data, and they have a hardware base that allows sharing. You know, people say the French succeeded because they have one reactor design. In fact, it's three reactor designs, and if you add the EPR, it's four designs, but they still have reactors in classes, and that turns out to be very helpful.
Question for you. I wondered what you thought about the recent announcement by the Army about utilizing micro reactors at their bases around the planet.
Yeah, well, what the Army learned, what everybody learned in Afghanistan, is that the easiest target is a diesel tanker truck. And if the Army the Pentagon ends up paying the development cost on a class of small reactors that are deliverable by truck, set them up within 24 hours, run them for days, weeks, or years, shut them down, let them sit for a week, and then truck them off again, that's going to be better for everybody. I suspect that it'll take a while to get this to be as reliable as a diesel generator, but I think it'll happen. I think there'll be a niche product. They won't be good for grid use. They're just too expensive, but they will find remote communities and mining operations, industrial operations. They will find a home. And I think eventually the fuel chain issues are being solved. We will have a HALEU supply. We will have these are pebble bed type fuel for the most part. And I think it'll be a step forward. And it's been a while since the military did anything that benefited the civilian power sector, but this falls into that category. I see a question in the chat. The NRC is working on approving licenses faster. It's not just pressure from the administration. There's an executive order. Is this a good idea? Well, yes. Some of what the NRC does is not very productive. They've got a bureaucracy that is resistant to change, and a bureaucracy that's now dealing with new technologies. I am open to the idea that they'll make errors, they'll approve things they shouldn't, and we're going to learn from experience. We'll hope the experiences aren't too painful. But yes, the NRC has this nasty habit of approving things that they've approved before and not approving anything that nobody's ever done before. And that's not a recipe for successful innovation and industrial progress.
Do you think the U.S. will be able to overcome the public acceptance and NIMBY problem?
Yes. Yes, I think for reactors, they're generally welcomed with open arms. If you look at the place where they want to put the natrium reactor, there's a 50-year-old coal plant that's shutting down. The town is going to dry up and blow away. Everybody's very eager for the reinvestment. I think that's true in most places where you would put a reactor. There's kind of a halo and a reverse halo effect as you get farther from the nexus that has the benefits. Some people will raise questions, but I think in general, look at Vogtle. People were delighted for 2 more units at Vogtle. They were delighted when there was going to be a third unit at River Bend. Um, all the places where these things have been proposed. There is an interesting case in Wyoming of a microreactor developer that wants to bring back the cores, and the town doesn't want the cores coming back. But that's but I think in general, the idea of public opposition is overrated.
Yeah, you mentioned the Army microreactors and fuel logistics. I read a study 15 years ago, maybe, about the true cost, the fully burdened cost of providing electricity at a forward operating base. When you factored in the trucks getting blown up by IEDs and VA care for the rest of their lives for the survivors and that kind of thing, the delivered cost of diesel fuel was hundreds of dollars per gallon.
Right.
And the delivered cost of electricity generated with an on-site diesel generator at the forward operating base was north of $20 a kilowatt hour. Interesting. Opportunity cost, Spanish disaster. So if you're collecting metrics, that's one. You might look up that study and see what the true fully burdened accounting cost of electricity for forward bases.
And what the Army really wants is electric Humvees, and in future some other electric powered weapons. So demand is increasing. I see a question in the chat. As more power plants are built to meet increasing demand for electricity by AI data centers, will the grid be able to handle the load? Well, this is actually something in nuclear's favor. The amount of transmission you need to support a new reactor is lower than what you need for wind or solar or hydro. And maybe not lower than for natural gas, but nuclear plants have reasonably flexible siting requirements. We have almost stopped building high voltage transmission in this country. We have tied ourselves into a knot with environmental rules, with the local ability to stop things. And we have evolved to an economic system that wants electricity dispatched over wider and wider areas, implying you need more and more transmission. Something's got to give here. And you can find this expressed in market locations where they issue RMR orders, reliability must run. That is, yeah, it's true if we use this plant over here instead of that one over there, costs would be lower, but we don't have the transmission in between. So we're going to pick this other plant that may be dirty and is certainly out of market. It's less economical and require it to run because that's the only way we can keep the electric supply stable. And there's more and more of that.
Matthew, question for you. This is not the first time in America's history that we've had a supply-demand gap in energy production. What lessons might you point us to give us some sense of hope here? I mean, there's a lot of cash flying around, but I want to see activity.
Well, the old utility model had its drawbacks. Among other things, it encouraged utilities to overbuild. But on the other hand, it also encouraged long-range planning. Arguably, the ISO model does not encourage long-range planning. It encourages leaving things to the last minute until the only thing you can build is natural gas. And we don't even have a steady supply of gas turbines. So you could make the argument that heading into this shortage, we realized we should have started building several large reactors 5 years ago. But that looking forward, we should streamline the amount of time it takes to build a power plant, but also be more willing to break ground on them, maybe share the risk of breaking ground on them, because the it's true you may end up overbuilt here or there, but being underbuilt is a lot more serious a problem that ripples through the whole economy. I see a question. Do you think space and moon bases will be good for proving ground for SMRs? They're working on kilowatt scale reactors for the moon. If we ever go to Mars, the way to get back is to use materials already on Mars, apply energy to them, and make synthetic, well, it's all synthetic, to make rocket fuel to get back with. That's going to require reactors. Building a base on the South Pole where there's limited light, where there's water underground, South Pole of the moon, is also going to require reactors. The DOE has done some good testing. I don't know if I'd call them SMRs. They're, micro reactors. They'll run unattended. But yeah, I think they're going to be essential. Interesting things, I'm sorry, are going on in space anyway. For a long time, we powered probes to the outer planets using plutonium-238. We're running low on it. It's a side effect of not producing a lot of nuclear weapons anymore, which is good. We're now moving to other isotopes for getting decay heat to turn directly into electricity. And I've cut somebody off. Whoever that was, please go ahead.
You talked about the microreactor company that was not accepted in Wyoming. Well, they've announced yesterday, public announcement, that they're going to establish their production facility here in Oak Ridge. Build
I missed that.
1 megawatt reactors. Well, it was getting afternoon. I haven't had time to catch up on that news. But we're seeing some suggested maybe getting close to one announcement a week for various nuclear startups wanting to locate in Oak Ridge, and often having promised land and financing from the state government. And this is an interesting situation. And I've been concerned about the fact of relying on state and federal money for a startup that may not have much of a future. But it sounds to me like, from some of what you said, that we also need to be concerned about the investments by companies like Google and Amazon, who, as I understood what you were saying, are actually buying production capacity away from the grid and privatizing what we used to have and raising the rates for everybody else. Comment on that?
Well, viewed from 20,000 feet, it doesn't matter who owns the production. The production is the same. Some of these deals, like restarting TMI Unit 1, actually add production. Some are just window dressing. If you look at all of these startups, it's clear to me that you're looking at 20 of the next 2 successful startups. You just got to figure out which 2 it is. It's in the nature of startups in nuclear and other fields, especially technical fields. Most of them aren't going to make it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying. And that doesn't mean that government entities can't give them a little push with, a deal on some land or a tax break or something else, because you expect a lot of these investments to go bad and a few of them to pay off big enough so it was all worth it. A lot of people went bankrupt trying to build airplanes before the Wright brothers got it going.
Hard. Yeah, we as a community just don't want to be holding the bag again on an advanced technology.
The barriers to entry have gotten high enough that you can't be the Wright brothers and invent something in the back room of your bicycle shop. Some of these people need a little push. Some of them are chasing goals that are unachievable. Some of them are not. And determining which is which is pretty tough.
I had a follow-up question, just adding on to that one. One of the things we're seeing a lot of is with these industry and data center groups is the potential of putting the development, the SMRs or the microreactors behind the actual meter. And then there's a lot of question as to who has priority when, when you do have brownouts, blackouts, potential for not enough power on the grid, whether the residential community or the commercial community takes precedence for that power. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the way it works now is if you own a generator, there are some jurisdictions where the utility will ask you to start up your generator on a particularly bad day, on a peak day. I should say, by the way, that the pattern of electric use in the United States is headed in the wrong direction. It's making the peaks peakier. Places are that used to be summer peakers will turn into winter peakers because of heat pumps. And the ratio of peak to trough will get larger, which will make life harder for the utilities. But generally, if you own it, you can run it as you need it. The distribution system is not really all that well set up for rotating blackouts, but they can do it. But they are aided by whatever behind the meter generation there is that relieves the overall grid of the burden. So anything you add is good, but a planned situation is a lot better. I see a question here. Oklo in Oak Ridge proposes doing reprocessing using a dry process, removing waste and creating fuel containing uranium and plutonium and reburning. I think in the long term, something like that is highly likely. Whether Oklo makes it work, I don't know. Oklo is an interesting company. It's not an energy company, it's a Silicon Valley startup. It went to the NRC with a really bare bones application and said to the NRC, here, this is all the documentation you guys need. And the NRC said, we reject this, come back when you've done your homework. They're also proposing to own their generators, not to sell them to users. They're going to sell the electricity. This is as different as Mr. Ford and Mr. Hertz were, and it's a lot of leaps to take at the same time. I wish them well. We'll see what happens. Bob, go ahead.
Several years ago, the Department of Energy paid a demand charge to TVA for the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant. Is that still done today? Do we have that kind of a process in place?
I'm not fully familiar with the TVA. Of course, there is no gaseous diffusion plant there anymore. Most utilities, I'll give you an example. I live in a 300-unit apartment building just outside Washington, D.C. And it's got one electric meter. It was built 50 years ago. They don't do things like this anymore. And people in the building are screaming, why can't we put solar on the roof? And the answer is our building is classified by Potomac Electric Power Company as commercial. And the building pays an energy charge and a demand charge. Demand, I think, is $3.50 per peak kilowatt. And if we put in solar, we would run the meter backwards, or well, sort of backwards. It would slow down. It's a 16-story building, so it's got a lot of demand relative to the roof area for kilowatt hours. And we would avoid the demand charge if solar produced in the peak demand hour, which of course it doesn't. I can't explain this to people in the building. I can't explain that we lose money on every kilowatt hour we produced because they're all keyed into kilowatt hours. Most places do have a demand charge, and I can imagine as people try to go to microgrids or on-site generation, that utilities are going to want to charge pretty steeply for being the backup power for somebody who's got an on-site generator.
You had just mentioned the difference between selling units and owning your own units and selling electricity. For startups, do you really see anybody willing to buy a untested reactor, financially untested, Or will everybody have to go to this model and sell, as we're seeing, electricity under power purchase agreements?
I think I lived for a long while in New England, where there are still vestiges of industrial parks built around hydropower. Somebody came along and built a dam, and then tapped the mechanical power, and then at some point they converted these to electric power and sold it to local industries. I think we could see something like that with nuclear, which would sell both electricity and steam, depending on what the customer wanted. I do think that yes, we could end up with people buying electricity as a service, but I also think that it's a little tricky because you don't really want to have a business that only operates when your neighborhood nuclear reactor is running.
You mentioned space nuclear power, getting back to that for a second. Don't know if you're aware, but the plutonium-238 program is actually canceled by NASA.
I'm sorry, I think I've lost you. Say again. I mentioned space nuclear power and
The plutonium-238
right.
program is canceled by NASA in the White House's budget request on 30 May. Most people still don't know about that. So it'll start ramping down in FY27 and it goes away in FY29. However, there are alternatives. I'm going to be working on one. So, but if you didn't know that,
Yeah, thank you. No, I think
it's as of the moment, it's gone.
I have seen people talk about using strontium-90 and other more widely available isotopes.
What I'm working on.
Yeah, some of which would be provided by the private sector.
Yep.
Which I think would be good news.
Do we have the manufacturing capacity?
I'm looking in the chat here. Wait a minute. Yeah, I see. Yeah, Florida started charging people higher rates when they converted to PV. This is a continuing debate around the country. How much should the utility pay for privately generated PV? Is direct meter is running the meter backwards the appropriate rate to do it at? You know, when solar is small, it doesn't matter. As it gets bigger, you realize you could have a problem here.
Do we have the capacity for building all of these new facilities and then for operating them? Because clearly you can have a good idea, but if you don't really know how to do it and operate it right, you have big problems, like the people who thought it was a good idea to put a candle up near the Browns Ferry
Right.
reactor to test for air leaks.
Right. I think Admiral Rickover was right when he said a paper reactor is simpler and easier than a real reactor. I think a lot of these startups will not go as smoothly. None of them will go as smoothly as they project. There'll be some hiccups along the way. Some of these ideas will work, some of them won't. In the United States, we lost the ability to cast reactor vessels domestically when the utilities got together in the early 90s and came out with a new set of requirements for reactor vessels. And these turned out to be something you could only do at Japan Steel Works or a handful of other places abroad. As we move to more advanced reactors, things that operate closer to atmospheric pressure, the number of places that can fabricate parts increases again, and we could get onshoring of this stuff. We'll have to if we're going to build them by the dozens. It remains to be seen which ones of these are going to work, and getting the supply chain in sync with the demand chain is going to be tough. Bob, I see you're waving your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm glad to get the Oak Ridge community here. I want to go back to reprocessing. It's interesting that the NOLO is a Silicon Valley company rather than a nuclear
Yeah.
company. But in reprocessing, I worry about not the proliferation, but the terrorism and everything. During the Manhattan Project, Enrico Fermi and others came up with a plan B if an explosion couldn't be made, and that was to poison with reactor fission products. And when we started in a reprocessing area in Oak Ridge on a massive scale, which we haven't done, we can learn from Hanford and Savannah River and other places that didn't work out really well. So that's a big concern I have with the terrorism part of reprocessing. And so
Well,
I want to put that out to everybody.
one thing, if you visit the current generation of plants, you see they've all got a truck barrier and they've all got guard towers, other stuff added later. None of them was designed for security. Most of these plants have an old parking lot where the weeds are now coming up through the asphalt where the workers used to park, and now it's inside the security perimeter. One of the things about starting from scratch is it's easier to assure security in a new plant that is designed for security, and that includes terror attack. I agree with you. There's a concern there, but I suspect it is manageable, especially if you start out, building in the modern era.
I see we're out of time.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Needs to move on, so.
I want to thank all of you for your good questions, your attention, and welcoming me. And I apologize, but I've got a Zoom that I lead at 1 o'clock every Tuesday that's been going on for years. And I'm going to have a room full of people screaming at me if I don't leave soon, if I don't get there soon.
Well, Matt, we want to thank you. Great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your time and interest.